everyone, and welcome to Pod TV's #1 advocate show, Timeshares Solution or Surrender with Irene Parker. We are on episode 26, I think, and it has been an amazing year so far. Irene Parker has taken over 3,000 calls, and she has dealt with every one of the timeshare situations that people have brought us. I would say, that there's just so many more out there. But the other problem isn't just the timeshares, it is also the exit companies. But today, we've got two special guests, and what we're going to discuss are the lending laws and the situations with the lending laws and how do they compare to real estate lending laws and why there's such a big difference. So everyone, help me welcome my superhero in taking care of these timeshare nightmares, Irene Parker. Hi, Irene.
Hi, and I want to, of course, acknowledge all of our volunteers across from coast to coast that are helping with our efforts to support timeshare members in distress. And this show is a full show today. We actually have three guests. A CPA, Scott Myers, he will be joining us later on in the show. But I would like to go ahead and introduce our guest before I do a little bit of a wrap up of some interesting things that happened after last Monday's show. So I will let you introduce the first guest, who is your sister.
Yeah, I know. She is awesome. And I have a rule of don't do business with your friends or family, but you can't help doing business with Kelly because she knows what she's doing. She's been doing this for almost 30 years. And I can remember when I met some of the people that she worked with many years ago, and they say, if you want to get something done and it's a difficult lending situation, give it to Kelly. And so everyone, I want to welcome Kelly Johnson, my sister, who has managed several of my refis and my finances through my troubling times after my husband died, especially. Welcome, Kelly. And where are you from?
Hey, I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I am with Motivation Mortgage.
Well, welcome. That was quick. So yeah, and then we have another guest joining us who's also in lending and who is having a situation with timeshares that you're helping out. Katie Holloway.
Hi.
And, Katie, hi. One of the things I want to mention is, Irene Parker and I, we have a shared passion, and that is working with people in domestic violence situations. And that's how we kind of met, is through a mutual friend in the fighting the timeshare wars, as I call them. And he said, you really need to meet Irene Parker, because he found out what I had been doing in domestic violence world, help supporting the victims and everything. And he said, you need to talk to her. And I learned from Irene that she had lost a friend in the battle of domestic violence, because you get that piece of paper, and that piece of paper gives you that false sense of security that you're taken care of, and you're not. But you too suffered, and your family suffered some tragedies as well. One of the things that we wanted to bring up as to why we discuss these situations is when you're dealing with a tragedy like with your family and the loss of a family member, you also kind of compare it to what you're dealing with. It's not the same, but with the timeshares, there's just a lot of problems, and it just gets mounting over and over and over, and you can't get out of it. But I'm going to let Irene take over from here because I'm rattling.
Well, it's about injustice. So I shared that my best friend, her husband, he murdered her in front of her 2-year-old. He actually shot her in the face 3 times. And I was to testify premeditation because she lived with me the last 2 months of her life with her daughter, and he switched his plea to guilty, and the judge sentenced him to 7 years. So on that day in 1974, I became a victim's advocate that day. And so Katie shared with me that her name is Katie Holloway, and she's married to the brother of Natalie Holloway that was murdered in Aruba, that all of us followed on the show. But before we get into lending, and we have Katie Kelly in lending. Katie works for a title company, and then we have a CPA hopefully will be joining us at 1:30 that will talk about timeshare taxation. But anyone who is going through the default process, and there are thousands, because there's little to no secondary market. If you have an adverse life effect, it's impossible to sell a timeshare with a loan. But before we jump into that, I want to do a follow-up from last Monday's show. And we had Donnie on, who talked about corporate consulting associates, that he paid them $8,999 to, and they referred him to a law firm called Thompson and Associates. And all they did was make a few changes on the letter and have Donnie send the letter to Blue Green, who just basically dismissed it. I asked attorney Mike Finn to read Donnie's report, and he said, based on the advice from Thompson and Associates, it's doubtful that they are a law firm, because obviously a law firm represents you. And so right after the show, I have my phone on airplane because I would get more of these calls, but I received a text message that said, I'm Candy Avalar with TSN, and I wanted to know if you wanted to be released from your timeshare. So I thought, well, let me play along a little bit. I usually don't have the stomach for it, but I asked a few questions, and she says, well, I will set you up with coordinate a specialist to work with you. And I said, well, I would need to vet that specialist. So let me know who that is. And she said, the specialist is Consumers Edge Travel Solutions. This is obviously a travel club wanting to sell me a travel club, and then I won't get out of my timeshare, and then I end up owning both. So I looked them up on the BBB, identical to the procedure that they used with Donnie last week. On June 22nd, 2019, I met with someone from Consumer Edge Travel Solutions. He said he's not a lawyer, but he works with people for legal representation. And he could help release me, and cited a 100% success rate. Well, that's telling you the success rate is including defaulting and foreclosing, and you don't have to pay anyone for that. He said we had a strong case. We paid $9,500 for his services. It turns out they kept $8,500 and paid the lawyer $1,000, tricked us into thinking he was going to release us. He made it seem like, that you were getting out of your timeshare, but they made him sign an agreement to buy the travel club. And then his calls did not get returned. So then the phone rings just after that, and it was Julian Cordova at Gold Max Realty, who wanted to sell my timeshare that has no resale value, or rent it, which is not allowed. And they're so arrogant and so convincing. And so I looked them up on the internet, and I got this website called Just Answer. They say they have 9 attorneys standing by to answer your question. And he responded that Gold Max Realty is a scam. But when I wanted to talk to that lawyer more, I would have had to have paid $5 online, which we should never do if we don't know who we're dealing with. So with that, let's have bring back Kelly and Katie back on. And since
my first thing is what attorney only charges $5
to answer a question exactly. So Katie purchased from Capital Vacations, and if Scott can join us at 1:30, his parents are both 76 years old, and they have a large loan with Capital. His father had 2 heart attacks and can't travel. And when he contacted Capital Resorts, they said they have no provision for medical hardship. Katie is a little bit different. Katie, tell us when you first bought your timeshare, what you were unhappy about, and what's the status today?
So I originally bought in May of 2021 from Silver Lake Resort. It's a nice resort right outside of Animal Kingdom in Orlando, Kissimmee area. And I bought there. I was told, of course, like all of the rest of us are now told, a lot of different things in the sales presentation that didn't end up being what it was in the contract. So what they were selling was 70 something thousand points where I could use it anywhere with RCI, or I could stay at the resort for a week every other year. I was told that the resort was family owned, not going anywhere, that we could, if we were unhappy, we could bring it back at any time, sell it back to the resort, or just give it back to the resort. Very, very soon after, probably less than a year, it was acquired by Capital. Capital does not have the same structure. They have their own point system, their own resorts. So I was not able to just give it back or sell it back because what I had was pretty much worthless to them. I was not aware of the fees associated with RCI exactly the way that they're actually charged. I thought that you could use your points and go anywhere you want. Not the case. You use your points and then you also pay extra fees just to use your points. You pay extra fees weekly just to go for an extra week not using your points. The main thing was it's just more money, more money, more money. So I was very unhappy the moment that I even was able to get online and see that information.
Well, and one thing I want to stop you a minute. Kim and I have talked about the laws need to be changed, or the timeshare law needs to be amended. And it is completely, and the Federal Trade Commission language is unfair and deceptive. So as you mentioned, when you first reached out, you did not have access to the booking site to be able to review what you were promised before the end of the rescission period, right?
Right. And we could not even really review it during the sales presentation either, which I thought it was a little fishy, as we would say. It's not, they try to go through things very fast. And so you can't really pick up on the details as they're just showing you here and there. Oh, look, you can go here with your points. And then they go to the next place. But when you click the resort, then you click the next button, that's where it shows you the fees. They don't show you that part during the sales presentation. It's a lot of bait and switch tactics, of course, that they use. And now it's to the point where it's even embarrassing to tell people this is what's happened. And I know that we're all in that same situation where you don't even really want to talk about it. And so I wanted to talk to them about resolution or surrender. They would not talk to me for a very long time until I stopped paying my payments. They kept contacting me about payments. So then I decided I need to talk to someone higher up, a supervisor of sorts. And so that was really the only way I was able to talk to someone about even getting a settlement offer or closing at all. So in that time that I missed my payments, my credit score went down over 100 points. It's showing as a default on a timeshare loan or a mortgage that I'm not even able to get credit for anything. My score was 800. Now with Experian, it's 650, 680, and it's very emotional at that point because my whole career is based on my credit score. So now I can't even find, I don't want to say I can't find employment, but employment that I'm trying to seek out with my experience and everything that I've had. I've been doing it for 15 years. is I would have to get very basic, low-paying job in the company just to be able to get in without a credit check. And that is very destructive to the career that I've tried to build for all these years. So
Well, and
just
I would
missing
like to
payments.
ask Kelly, who works in lending,
Yes.
you also, and I've heard this with other people, that the contract rescission period should begin the day you sign or the day you have received all your documents. So
You should
Katie,
never leave. You should never leave without every document. You should have all your
They
documents.
Right. They even make you sign a form saying that you've received all the documents without even giving you all the
With the
documents.
documents. Yeah. Yep. Don't
And-
worry. We'll give them to you. You'll have them. We'll send them to you an
Absolutely.
email. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
so what
Mhm.
action, explain, Katie, the actions you took after, when did you realize you were missing documents? How many documents were you missing? And, you know, does that affect in lending besides timeshare the fact that you were not provided, or is just simply the fact that you acknowledged you received them, you don't have an argument?
It could be a mixture of all of that in one, to be honest. They get you with signing the contract that you've received everything, so that may be what they can hold on to. I realized it after we went to once it was acquired by Capital, we went and sat down for an owner. I'm sorry, I don't remember what they call it, but where you sit down, they want to talk to you about the new ownership and how you can use your points, or you can trade up for capital points. So I realized at that point I didn't want it. I wanted to cancel. This was not what I signed up for. It's too costly. And at that point, I started reviewing my contract. I reviewed the documents, and that's whenever I realized I didn't have what they told me that I had. I asked for copies multiple times of what I signed in every package. They wouldn't send it to me for a very long time. And so that was probably a year later from my original signing date, which is now about 2 years ago when I started this cancellation process. So it's been very emotionally, almost physically, mentally draining just to try to get some sort of settlement or cancellation. They
No.
just, since it's not Capital claims that since they don't hold my mortgage, even though they do hold the mortgage, that they can't cancel it for me. But they're trying to make a settlement of some sort.
And Kelly, the the fact that, is that true with other non-timeshare lending, that if you don't receive all the documents, the rescission period should not start?
Absolutely. And I mean, just to reiterate, like our industry is so different than timeshare, and especially in like my continuing education classes that I have to take to be licensed every year, it will tell you specifically like the 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 situations that are exempt from what I go through is like timeshare. Timeshare is always exempt. But if somebody came to me or my company and let's just say it's day 4 of the rescission, and they came and said, "Hey, we're not happy with this," or if it's like, right there at the rescission period, we're not going to, or I have seen it, let's say that, where we're like, okay, we're going to honor that rescission, because the last thing you want is somebody to come back and say, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And if they go to the right agency or commissioner or whoever governs that specific lending, I mean, you can lose your license. There's fines and penalties all over the place. Again, I don't know how timeshare works, but we're not, on my side of the world, we're not going to mess around with, did we do this correctly? Because it could just take one thing.
I want to add something. What they gave me was a little credit card USB, right?
Yeah,
I didn't get that.
And I'm on vacation. We're there
yeah.
the first 5 minutes of our vacation, and they give me this little bitty, and here's all your documents. And, okay, again, I was totally intoxicated. But this is what they give you, this little credit card USB, and they expect you to somehow or another read all of this while you're on vacation for the 3-day rescission period. And but I think that the laws do need to change. I don't think the rescission period should begin until you get home from vacation, and that if you're on vacation when you meet these people, which is what generally happens. But I also think that when you've received the hard copies, all of them, and we were talking about this earlier, Irene, it's not just about what they told you and isn't in the written contract. It's about the omissions to the written contract. It's about what they don't tell you, which we've learned is very important. Hey guys, we've got a fan who says hi, Maddie. How are you doing, Madison?
Well, we would not be able to have them start the rescission when you get home from vacation. Some people go for 1 week, some people go for 3 months, but you should be able to say when you have access to the rescission period. Now, we have our viewers are going to be interested in, okay, I've stopped my maintenance fees, or what happens if I stop my maintenance fees? What happens if I stop my loan payments? And I think it's very important to understand judicial versus non-judicial foreclosure. And I'm really glad that Katie and Kelly are here, because I've never been quite 100% sure that I've got this right. And it's very important. So if you are, we're talking about a mortgage now, or an installment loan, a timeshare loan, whatever we want to call it. So some states have, there's either judicial foreclosure is a legal process. And Kelly, stop me, or Katie, if I say something that doesn't sound right, or you want to jump in, just raise your hand. So you have to file a lawsuit in order to foreclose in a judicial foreclosure. The lender can recover losses if a borrower defaults, but the confusing thing is the time, like Katie, her Silver Lake timeshare is worthless to her, but if she paid $10,000 for it, Capital can take that back and either turn it into points and sell it for $10,000, or resell the deed at full price. So so in other words, they buy it back for $1, and then they turn around tomorrow and sell it for $10,000, but they turn around and sue Katie for the $10,000 loan she defaulted on. And in other words, they double their money if they're able to get away with that. Does that, so far, Kelly, you're in lending, does that make sense?
Yes.
So even with non-timeshare lending, if they take, and there was a law,
they can take the home back during foreclosure, sell it. If they don't sell it for what the balance was left on it, they can go after, the balance, attorney fees. Typically you don't see that a lot. But yes, they can. Like,
and they're
been in foreclosure, it's typically not something, it's like, okay, this home, like an FHA loan, I can do a loan on somebody on FHA if they've been out of foreclosure for 3 years. Well, 9 out of 10 times that person who was foreclosed on did not pay the remaining balance if there was one left over after the sale of their foreclosed property. So you're not going to see that like you do in timeshare, where they can just come in and put a judgment on you. It blows my mind. They're exempt from everything.
The difference, I think, is that with a home, you actually have actual tangible real estate that you can sell prior to being foreclosed on.
Yes.
There's nothing you could just get out and sell to get out of it just to pay your balance off. With work, I do the refinances. We do 90% of our businesses refinances. We're doing thousands a month. And I am in funding within the title company. So I watch the money coming in and out. I see people paying off timeshares constantly over and over again
Really?
with their home refinance. Yes, people cash
Yeah.
out on their home refinance, get their mortgage rate at right now. I mean, we were at 7%. Now mortgage rates are lower at, I don't want to quote anything, but it's 6.5% normally right now. But
Yeah.
I did one for Blue Green. We paid off 4 separate Blue Green accounts for one person, and it totaled almost $100,000. They paid it off with the cash out equity of their home that they live in just to get out of
Yes.
it. And
I've
it's
done
so
that
sad
before.
when I see it coming through.
Yeah, I've seen it done. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, in Florida, it's so the mortgage. So in other words, with judicial mortgage, the mortgage company is required to get court approval. Now, non-judicial foreclosure, it's a matter of law. So it's without the judicial system. They don't file a lawsuit. And people get these notices in the mail and they get all upset. But this is what the procedure is. Number one, you get a notice of delinquency. Katie, check.
Yeah.
And then number two, you get a notice of default. Then you hopefully get a notice of the sale of the property. And there are state statutes. Now, this is where I get fuzzy. There are state statutes that apply to non-judicial foreclosure. Florida has no such statute. Thus, in Florida, we must go through the courts. Does that make sense?
It does to me, because if they don't have a statute that says that there's not a non-judicial system in place, excuse me, then they have to go through the judicial process of it.
Okay, so if you default on a loan, it's unlikely, and I've talked to a law firm where there's about a dozen lawsuits that Holiday Inn, Timeshare Holiday Inn Club Vacation, have basically using the owners as a pawn to punish the law firm, because they rack up all, and the law firm doesn't charge any extra to defend them. And they haven't been successful, but it still blows my mind that I could have, like Katie, a $10,000 timeshare that's worthless to her. So since it's worthless, they buy it for $1, turn around and sell it for $10,000, but can still go back and sue Katie for $10,000 for the promissory note. It just doesn't seem right now.
No, it blows my mind. That's what I say this all the time when I'm taking my continuing education classes. We are, as a lender, we are governed by our commissioner, our real estate commissioner per state, that every state's different. It's so regulated. And then there's these are the situations that does not pertain to these laws, and it's timeshare, double wides, DSCR loans. Like, it is absolutely mind blowing how timeshare just gets away with evering.
Well,
But
and one of the reasons,
your credit. That's
one of the reasons
we
we formed Timeshare and Resort Developer Accountability Inc., a 501c4, and we formed it in 2019. And the main reason is what I read. I could not believe this. The timeshare industry lobby is ARDA, the American Resort Development Association. And they had stated on their website, there's ARDA and there's ARDA Rock, Resort Owner Coalition, that purports to be lobbying on behalf of timeshare consumers. Ironically, the chairman of ARDA Rock is a consulting executive with Capital Resorts. They put on their website for ARDA Rock, for members like Katie and me, that they are lobbying for changes in 14 states. There's 4 core issues. One of them is non-judicial foreclosure to support the timeshare consumer. The same year, in 2019, at an ARTA conference with their peers, their industry developer peers, the quote was from Kenneth McKelvey: "The best thing we can do is judicial foreclosure, ruin their credit and enforce the contract." And I could not believe it. So, now there was also, and I'm hoping that Scott can join us, but you can both comment as well, that there was a legislation that they attempted to pass that was, let's see where I have it here. I forgot the bill number, but that legislation said that if a timeshare should be taxed at the value for the timeshare member, not the resale value. In other words, the timeshare consumer is paying the tax, the higher tax, and what they compared it to is, I'm looking for the bill number. It's not here. Well, it's not that important. But what they compared it to is if your house could only be sold for $100,000, but you're taxed on $300,000, that isn't fair to the homeowner. And the bill passed the House and it failed in the Senate. So they were talking about timeshare resales. So that doesn't make sense to me, that Katie has to be taxed on the $10,000 value of that timeshare that's worthless to her. She's basically paying the higher tax for the timeshare developer. Does that make sense?
It does, because it makes sense. It doesn't seem right, but it's almost like if my house is, I'm selling my house. Let's just say I did a short sale because I'm about to lose my house. Katie, you know what a short sale is.
Yep, absolutely.
You know,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I'm going under value, just to kind of get out of everything. I'm still going to be taxed on what the tax value of my property is. And my typically tax value is going to be lower anymore. It just seems like it keeps getting higher than what an appraised value is, or what you might sell it at. But we might come into an age where tax values are the same as your appraised value, maybe even higher. So like right now, if my house is worth, the state or the city or the county could say we say your house is worth $500,000. Well, I can only sell it for $475,000. I'm going to be taxed on that extra $25,000 regardless. Does that make sense?
So it basically works the same way in timeshare or traditional real estate.
Right. That's just an example. Typically your tax values are lower, but I mean, if I can't get what my tax value is for my house, I'm still going to be taxed on it because that's what the county set forth as my value.
Okay. Now, the other question that comes up over and over again is credit repair. And so Katie's credit score has dropped significantly, and several of our guests have experienced that. You have these credit repair companies that I read one of the responses from TransUnion that said that you're not allowed to charge an upfront fee for credit repair. So
no, I can't charge a fee, period. No.
Can you?
I can get charged. I want to weigh in on credit for. Can I interrupt for one second?
Yes, please.
Okay, Katie, I want to ask you something. Like when you went in and you had your presentation and you're married, did they automatically say your husband has to be there?
If I was married at the time, yes, they make him be present. Yes.
And I can guarantee you 9 out of 10 times they're going to make you file this together. so that they can't, so you can't just say, well, I don't, okay, fine, my credit's going to go bad, but I still have my husband's credit. So they're going to attack you on both ends. Like they're going to make sure that,
Yeah.
So let's just
We
start with
weren't
that.
technically married when I bought, so luckily it's only under me.
Right.
Oh.
So if you're married, they're going to come in and they're going to make you do this together so
Right.
that there is no way, there's no fallout on their side of it, so that they're going to be able to get your husband's credit ruined and they're going to make your, so let's just start with that. That's just wrong 100%. Like, you know, there's no breathing room for credit for a married couple. So as far as credit repair goes, you are correct, Irene. You cannot charge a person an upfront fee. We don't even charge it on a on the loan estimate. So once I disclose my file, I disclose my credit reporting fee, and it's always a flat fee. I can't go back and change that. I can't go back into it and say, okay, I just did $500 worth of credit repair for these people, which, you know, a credit reporting agency could charge me, and then say, okay, I'm going to pass that fee back on to my client, because that's, you can't do that. It's not a valid change of circumstance. You know what I'm talking about, right, Katie? Mm-hmm. So those services that we do to help repair a person's credit, is we take that fee for them, and we work with people, you know, to get their scores up like that, and we do it as a service that we cannot charge.
The question I'm trying to answer for myself is, how do I get this off of my credit 100% with or without paying it down or settling? Because it's only being reported to one credit bureau, but of course, you know, they take the lowest average of all of them in order to get
what
a loan.
Is it being reported to Experian or
Experian? I think
Experian. Yeah, Experian picks up all of them.
It's usually Experian. And let me introduce Scott Myers, who's joined our stage today. Hi, Scott. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and Katie, you're in the same boat as Scott's parents. Scott is a CPA, and his parents have defaulted on a fairly sizable loan. And 2 days ago, I received a call from Josephine, and I asked Scott to call me when I was talking to Josephine, because it's Capital Resorts, where she is 82, her husband is 88. He's had 2 heart attacks and cannot travel. She did stay at her Capital Resorts in Myrtle Beach with a friend, and was told, and I've heard other complaints like this, where, oh, you have a deed, just like you did, Katie. Mm-hmm. You have a vacation week. Now Capital Vacations has taken this over, so you need to transfer your deed into the Capital Vacations Trust. And she never was the word points used. And so she walked out of there paying $20,000, 82 years old, probably has an 800 credit score, and she is left with no choice to default. So, Scott, if you want to jump in, there was a couple tax questions I wanted to ask you, but sure. You've been supporting your parents during this horrible process. How are they holding up throughout all of this? And what has been your interaction with Capital Vacations?
So first, I mean, thank you for that. It was pretty. My dad's had some health issues now for about a year, actually more than that, and basically can't travel. So it's been somewhat. I started looking at their finances, and was kind of like, holy smokes, this thing is rather large dent into their budget. And then I was looking at what did they actually get and what happened, and that kind of went down this path of, okay, what's going on here? What was they actually signed up for? What are they supposed to get? Is this thing even viable for them to use? And it just turned out it wasn't, and it was also a huge chunk. And I think they were worried because they signed this contract, and it's for this amount. But as we've dug into it, and you and I have talked, Irene, like a lot of this stuff is one, you know, we went through the whole story, very high pressure sales tactics through the whole thing, basically taking advantage of them. I think, you know, at some point the rules of the game changed, as we found, where it went from like a deeded type, almost real estate transaction, you know, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, to a points, quote unquote, point system. And I think that was probably used to get around these types of legislation and laws. So it's been harrowing on them. I think, you know, when you have this amount of debt, you're not, you know, they're not, you know, they're solidly middle class. They aren't rich by any means. You look at it and you're like, holy cow, you know, we have this huge debt. We don't know how to do it, take care of it, you know, and it's kind of compiled. And we took a step back and looked at it and say, okay, what was the value given? What have we gone? So we went to capital and just said, look, like, they can't use it anymore. We're just seeking to get out of it. We're not seeking any sort of damages or any sort of, you know, compensation for amounts not used, or really like egregious pricing in really what they were able to receive. And even when they tried to use it, for example, like it was very hard to get weeks. It's hard to get the right thing or get what they wanted. So, you know, even then, I think there was a lot of, for the price paid, there was definitely a lot of promises in the contract that didn't get fulfilled. But of course, you know, that doesn't seem to work both ways when you're talking to them. They basically told us, you know, there's no policy even for medical hardship, which is clear. Like my dad will be lucky if he could, you know, travel. It's hard for him to get, you know, the doctor's appointments, let alone to vacations. So, yeah, it's been harrowing. I think though through the process, you can, how do we say it? You can get used to anything, and you can learn what they can and cannot do. And we basically decided to stop paying for the time being and let them, you know, let the process work, because as long as you're paying them, they're not going to care to.
When did they stop paying?
It would have been a few months ago. I don't remember quite exactly, but it was about a few months ago. And yeah, they're gonna go to collections. You're gonna have those types of calls. But at the same time, it's in my mind, and again, not legal advice, not financial advice, but if you don't do something like that, they're gonna just let you pay. No one's gonna care to listen to you. They have all the power.
If they would cancel your loan, this is one of the reasons I was happy that you joined us today. Yeah. If they do agree to cancel, Katie, your loan or Scott's parents' loan, then you get a 1099-C in the mail where they expect you to pay taxes on the forgiven loan amount. And our TARTA board president, Sheila Brush, is a tax preparer, and she wrote an article about this. We have been able to dispute this successfully every time. But how can it be, as I understand it, the 1099-C is if you're enriched. So if you bought a boat for $10,000, you had a $10,000 loan, you defaulted, and you owed them $5,000, but you kept the boat, you were enriched. But how can they issue that 1099-C if you're left with nothing of value?
Yeah, and again, this may be something to talk with your tax professional, but I would say I'll give my opinion. So typically you would have, there's a few sides of the transaction. So one, you could say, okay, typically anytime you have a loan and it's forgiven, then that is counted as income. But that said, you would also then say, okay, well, what was the other side of that transaction? The other side was, I bought this property or this timeshare for X amount of money. And how much is it worth now? It's worth zero. So probably, and this is a cheeky accountant in me, but I would say, okay, well, I bought this timeshare, maybe I used X amount, and then now it's worth nothing to me. So I actually have a capital loss. If I'm going to get charged the gain for the loan, then I would kind of go to the IRS and be like, okay, well then I should have a capital loss, and then maybe you recoup some of that in taxes. Now,
I agree.
No, but that's right. Yeah. Both sides of the
Good
transaction. So
no, it's true.
If I receive that, because let's say let's take a more simple example. You have you buy stock, and sometimes people actually take a loan out to buy stock. So let's just say I did that, and if for some reason that loan, let's say it was from my parents or something, and they decided to forgive it, you know, they were just trying to let me start out. I don't know. I was a young person at one point. then I would have to pay income on the loan forgiveness, even if it was from your parents, or let's say it wasn't a gift. But let's say I lost all the money in the stock market. Well, I would take the loss on that stock, and likely if your house burned down and you couldn't sell it, the bank gave you loan forgiveness, you could take theoretically a loss on your house that you can't sell, or you'd sell it for the land value, and that would be it. So I think it's very difficult because in these transactions, usually there's no proof of sale because you can't sell them because they are not worth anything. And maybe with the IRS, you'd have to prove that, hey, like, go to these websites, like maybe I could get $100 out of it, like some very nominal value, but even then, most of the time they're literally not worth anything. So that's where I would take this if I was a tax professional, is, hey, like, we're just not recording this other side of the transaction, just this loss.
Well, and Terry McCain asked a question. I've already answered why the laws support the timeshare. It's because of the $5 million that are automatically billed to maintenance fees to lobby. But what I asked of our two lenders here today, Katie and Kelly, and I want to ask you, is if Katie has a $10,000 timeshare and it's worth nothing to her, she can't. It's worthless. But then she turns around and it gets foreclosed. They buy it on auction for $1, and then they turn around and they sell it for $10,000. But then they turn around and sue Katie for the $10,000 note. In other words, they double their money. So and then a comparable situation is a legislation that was attempted in 2023 where the timeshare is, you buy it for $30,000, and the property taxes or whatever taxes on it are taxed under $30,000, but it's worth nothing on resale. The developer buys it for $1 and sells it for $30,000. So isn't the consumer being taxed unfairly?
Yeah, I mean, in that case, I think absolutely. And when you think of, if you just go to like fundamentals of taxation, you generally want, whoever gets the benefit to get the tax, right? Like that's in general. If I buy something, I pay a sales tax, I'm getting the benefit. If it's my income, if I'm working, I tax because I have that benefit. And you generally want to match the cash receipts with taxation. Like, that's generally how our tax law is supposed to be set up. So if you're not getting cash from a transaction, for example, it's usually not the time to tax somebody because they don't have the means to pay it. Because you don't want a situation where somebody is quote unquote making some income, but then they don't have the means to pay out the taxes. That's like with your wages. That's why that's why, with the exception of a few countries that have income taxes, you get a withholding from your paycheck every time you get a paycheck. It's because that's when most people have the cash to actually pay for the taxes, even though they're only due technically at the end of the period. I don't know. Does that answer your question, Irene, or should we dig into this a little
and
more?
then Terry said, why can we change the laws? Well, that bill to tax fairly passed in the House and it failed in the Senate. So I don't know what Kelly has said, and if you've noticed that RESPA, Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, do I have that right?
Yes.
There's all of these requirements, good faith estimates and things, that if you buy a $200,000 condo, you have to go through this. But with timeshare, there is no,
Right.
none of those disclosures are required. And that just seems very unfair.
I think too, we assume, but I'm going to say a few points on that. One is, yes, we can change the laws, and that's why you need to go vote. And not even picking a side. If whoever's in charge isn't doing what you want, and if you keep voting for them, basically that's telling them, hey, keep doing what you're doing. Now, sometimes I would say the other side is no legislative person, and this is not a dig on politicians. It could easily come that, but I just don't want to say that. But all of us here, like, how much did we know about timeshare before we got involved in this? Like, I did not know the depth. 2 years ago, me would have not understood all of the complexities and what's going on here and the taxation. And sometimes it's a matter of communicating, writing, telling your legislative person, like, hey, this, especially at the state level, they're way more easier to contact than you think, and reach out and say, hey, this is what's happening, this is the implications, and this is really what would make sense. And in that case where it failed in the Senate, maybe write your senators first.
Well, the problem is it costs
Yeah.
$100,000 a year to lobby at the federal level,
Right.
and $10,000 to $12,000 per month per state. And in 2010, ARDA was fined for not calling those donations voluntary. So now they're automatically billed and they're opt out. And in my case, they're buried. So it says pay your maintenance fee bill. You don't
Right.
see it. You have to go into account history. So I don't know how effective it is to attempt to reach a senator without going through a $10,000 a month lobbyist.
Oh, for sure at the federal level, and even in this case, I mean, I think let's presuppose if you're burying fees in your maintenance, that are opt out and quote unquote optional. I mean, right away, I could tell you in some countries, that's even illegal. I don't think it's illegal in the U.S. I'm in Canada right now, and certain things are not opt out; they are opt in. And that for that reason, that you actually have to choose, like, hey, I want to give you money. And even in your taxes, I think when you do your taxes, and we're talking about it, you have to opt into some of the like voluntary, election donations, etc. So ethically, morally, I would probably argue if you're taking money from people or charging them for something, they should have a right to know what you're charging them for, especially if they've already been fined by the U.S. government. And so maybe we just have to recognize we're not dealing with. I have to be careful how I say this, but we may not be dealing with people who are, they will take whatever they can that's legal.
Well, and I sat behind Mr. McKelvey when he testified at the Florida legislative workshop that all resorts have a dissolution policy, every single one. I've been in this business 30 years. Just day after day, we're hearing Great Eastern, Vacation Village, only if you have medical hardship, that there are many that have no dissolution policies,
Right.
Soleil Management. And then sitting next to him testifying was the president of ARDA, not ARDA Rock, Jason Gamble. And
Right.
he was then senior VP of lending of legal for Wyndham, and he testified that Wyndham has a hardship department. How is it not elder abuse? Your father and mother are 76, so they could live into their late 80s, and they're expected to pay this loan and their maintenance fees. If it was a house, they could sell it if you had to downsize and go into assisted living. But to leave seniors with no choice but to default. And we spend a lot of time talking about the elderly and harm to seniors. To me, it's worse for people like Katie that are trying to raise kids and buy cars and get jobs. And the military, the active duty service members and a lot of veterans, when they leave active duty, they maintain positions where they have to maintain a security clearance. And to have hundreds and hundreds of service members, we have next week on with us Andrew and Brooke, where he spent 10 years in the Air Force National Guard, and he wanted to transfer from Idaho to Utah, and he wanted to retire in 20 years, and he could not transfer, felt he wouldn't be able to transfer because of his Westgate loan default, where a young couple with a 6-year-old was sold a 4-bedroom, told how he could rent for to make money. So it just seems like, and the critics are like, I don't know why Katie and Scott's parents, that they just don't know how to use their timeshare. They should know better. We've had people on that have been timeshare members for 20, 25 years, and it wasn't until the last upsell that they fell for this. And I always want to promote AARP staff writer Doug Shadell's book, Outsmarting the Scam Artist, because everybody says, like Katie, I'm embarrassed. I feel, I should have known better. We have Tom in Florida. He spent 23 years with the Baltimore County Police Department. I should have known better. Doug Shadell says, no one is smart enough to outsmart a scam artist. He called it 90% ether, where you're worked into an emotional state. So in the case, Scott, of your parents, I wrote down the reasons that they purchased. It turned out in 2000, way back in 2017, same thing. If we didn't transfer our Grand Crown Resort into Capital, we're in trouble. Okay, 2018, a vacation club where you could get access to cruises. There was no advantage. The cruises were already available. January 2019, the sales agent, common ploy. You should have never been sold what that last sales agent sold you. And, so you would think, well, then cancel that. No, it's water over the bridge, but we can fix it with an enhanced plan that costs them another $43,000 because they hadn't spent enough money yet. And then in 2021, told that the down payment was going to go away because of equity. And have you filed a complaint with the South Carolina Attorney General? Scott?
We have not yet. I think, our main goal is to get out of the situation, and so far that's working. I think, I want to hold that card if something were to escalate. Because also, like, I have to take it to the point of
I did it.
Sorry, yeah, Kate. I mean, well, part of it is, like, my parents are older. My dad's dealing with medical issues. If it escalates, I'm happy to escalate it, and I'm also happy to not have them deal with this anymore. And if there's nothing happening, then they don't really need that stress. So that's one of the reasons. But that said, it seems like we lost Katie. Why we decided, we'll hold that back.
Actually, you should
to help others.
Yeah, you should go ahead and file with the South Carolina Attorney General, because you might be ignored, but typically the resort will not ignore. And for the second reason is to get it on record, because it's public record. And there are consumer attorney generals, and they are what I consider pro-industry attorney generals. So the Arizona industry attorney general is very pro, at least the one in 2016 was very pro consumer. Florida seems very pro industry. I don't know, maybe $90 billion flowing into Florida, and tourist money might have something to do with that. What do you think?
Probably.
Good. Yeah, follow the money is usually a good.
2 minutes to wrap as well. And this has been a phenomenal conversation, because there are so many people, when they call Irene and they get into this financial bind and they're trying to buy a house or get their mortgage, and they have no idea how bad a timeshare truly messes up their ability to do things. Scott, I want to push you a little bit, or encourage you to file something with the state attorney general. Though some of them won't do anything, you'd be surprised how much, if they do reach out, it might help. But one thing I've learned is, till death do you part does not exist. The children do inherit the debt if the parents die. And, like Irene says, you got to go down and transfer and say you don't want it, but you got to know to do that. So there's things that are omitted, that are not told or disclosed to people. To me, that's even worse, because the children didn't know any of this. They don't know what the contracts are. So, even if you're older, you're going to get strapped with this if something happens to your parents. So make sure that you look at all of that as well. But I would start the steps to legally getting out of all of this. Irene has got a great mechanism on how to do it. And if you follow these steps, then you can always fall back on, well, we did this and this and this. So.
And it was actually
Kimberly.
written.
Yeah, I'll take that advice. And thank you, Irene, by the way. for all your hard work here.
Yeah, thank
and
you,
advice.
Irene. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, and it's like you talk
without-
about that step by step. That was authored by Fran Dygulski, who resolved a Diamond Resorts dispute, and she also was able to get released from a Westgate timeshare. So it's our volunteers across the country, and it's members helping members. Like Scott, you talking to Josephine, who's agreed to be on the show next week, I believe. So I'm looking forward to that show as well.
And don't forget to go get your timeshare, mug. We have
Mug.
timeshare regrets mug. They're really pretty. I can't show the picture today, but we got some pretty good logos going out there and mottos. So don't forget to get your timeshare mug and support us. Everyone have a great weekend. We'll see you next week, 1 p.m. Timeshare Solution or Surrender with Irene Parker. Thank you.
Thank you.